the supplemental must be enacted as soon as possible. While the hearing today will cover a range of topics, I want to highlight a few that are very important to me. First, I'm concerned about our nation's ability to address emerging threats. Many of the major systems that we rely on from each of the services are delayed and require additional funds from their original stated contracts. This needs to stop. Our industrial partners seem to be losing workers right and left after they've been trained, particularly in the shipbuilding industrial base. This is unacceptable, and it is extremely concerning to me. The Department, Congress, and industry must work together to ensure that there is consistency because of those jobs and the people in them are important to the national security of our nation. Second, the subcommittees heard from the Army and the Navy about how they are addressing recruitment and retention issues. I'd like to know what you think the progresses of the services have made in recruitment goals in the past year, and do you believe this will get us back on track on the near-term future? And finally, given the focus on the Pacific, which is important, and the recent visit of Washington by the Japanese Prime Minister, I'd like to hear your thoughts on our relationship with Japan. How can the department work with Japan to better utilize maintenance and repair facilities in Japanese territory that our forces can execute their missions more effectively and efficiently? And what are some of the ways that the department has worked to strengthen our relationship with allies such as the Philippines, Australia, and South Korea? Again, thank you to the service for our witnesses who are appearing before us today and those who serve and work under you. We appreciate your testimony and answers to our questions. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the courtesy, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. McCollum. And now I'd like to turn to the chairman of the full committee, my good friend, Chairman Tom Cole. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chairman Calvert, and good morning to our witnesses, certainly Mr. Secretary, General Brown, Undersecretary McCord. It's great to have you here this morning. Iran's missile and drone attacks on Israel and the persistent and aggressive actions of China and Russia are reminders that we need a strong military to deter war, protect U.S. interests, and when necessary, win in conflict. We are witnessing an evolution in warfighting through the proliferation of technology. Small, cheap, and autonomous systems provide regional actors with the ability to threaten their neighbors and endanger the global order. With that backdrop, the Department's fiscal year 2025 request makes tough choices to stay under the Fiscal Responsibility Act caps. It trades long-term modernization of capabilities to preserve near-term readiness of force. Frankly, like my friend Chairman Calvert, I'd like to see an increase in defense spending to more completely address these threats. And I certainly, as my good friend Ranking Member McCollum said, support the supplemental both for its immediate impact and its long-term assistance in developing and sustaining our own industrial base. However, additional funding would not absolve the Department of its responsibility to deliver capabilities on time and on budget. In that regard, I certainly associate myself with the remarks of my good friend Chairman Calvert. From hypersonic programs to shipbuilding to aircraft like the E-7, I continue to be concerned by the Department's inability to deliver weapons to the warfighter in a reasonable time frame. Successful weapons system acquisition requires clear standards, adequate funding, competent program management, and a trusting partnership between the Department and industry. It also requires constant communication and transparency with the Congress. These are some of the areas, there are some areas, such as munitions, where the Department is working directly with this committee and providing the funding and demand signal necessary to ramp industrial base production. I'm interested in your thoughts, Mr. Secretary, on how to go a step further and develop surge capacity across the industrial base. This would increase our readiness for whatever the global security environment throws at us. I want to note that the Department is enduring the most challenging recruiting crisis since the creation of the all-volunteer force. The junior enlisted force is the lifeblood of the military, and this committee is committed to recruiting and retaining the best America has to offer. There's no shortage of challenges for this department, and I look forward to hearing how the fiscal year 2025 budget request addresses those issues. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Chairman. Gentlemen, your full written testimony will be placed on the record. Please give a brief summary of your statements. Secretary Austin, the floor is yours.
Chairman Calvert, Ranking Member McCollum, distinguished members of the committee, thanks for the opportunity to testify in support of President Biden's proposed fiscal year 2025 budget for the Department of Defense. And Chairman Cole, I look forward to continuing to work closely together as you take the gavel of the full committee. I'm pleased to be joined by our outstanding Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General C.Q. Brown, and by Undersecretary Mike McCord, the Department's Comptroller. Let me start by thanking this committee for all that you do to support the U.S. military, our troops, and our military families. We've again seen the exceptional skill and professionalism of our forces after Iran's unprecedented and reckless assault on Israel. Alongside Israel and our allies, we had enormous success in defeating Iran's attack. We will continue to stand ready to protect our troops in the region and to support the defense of Israel from attacks by Iran or its proxies. And our commitment to Israel's security is ironclad. And let me be clear, while we've not seen renewed attacks on U.S. forces or facilities, as President Biden has said, we will not hesitate to take all necessary actions to protect our people. Now, let me turn to this year's budget request.
Austin, you have killed my child's cousins in Palestine. You continue.
Meeting will be suspended.
Everyone in this room is
The committee will be in order. The chair notes the disturbance of the committee proceedings. The chair reminds our guests of disruptive demonstration in the audience in violation of the House rules. Any additional disruptions to the hearing will require law enforcement to remove protesters from the room and restore order. And I will do that. Mr. Secretary, please continue.
Thanks, Chairman. As Secretary, I've always been guided by three priorities: defending our nation, taking care of our people, and succeeding through teamwork. Our budget request for fiscal year 2025 will advance all three of these priorities.
The committee will stand in recess until the Capitol Police can restore order. Capitol Police, please remove the demonstrators from the room. Committee's in recess. Please remove all protesters from the room. Please remove all protesters from the room. Any additional protests, all protesters will be removed from the room. Committee will come back to order. Mr. Secretary, please proceed.
As I said, Chairman, our budget request for fiscal year 2025 will advance all three of the priorities that I mentioned. First, the President's request will invest in cutting-edge capabilities across all domains. This includes $48.1 billion for naval and shipbuilding capabilities, $61.2 billion to reinforce U.S. air dominance, and $13 billion to Army and Marine Corps combat capabilities. Our request will also provide $33.7 billion to strengthen our space architecture and $14.5 billion to develop and field advanced cybersecurity tools. It will direct $49.2 billion to modernize and recapitalize all three legs of our nuclear triad. And it will sharpen our tech edge through a $167.5 billion investment in procurement and a $143.2 billion investment in R&D. Second, this budget request will support our outstanding troops and their families. That includes raising base pay and housing allowances, investing in better housing, making child care more affordable, and funding vital work to prevent sexual assault and suicide in the military. And third, this request will help the department further deepen our teamwork worldwide. Our network of allies and partners remains a strategic advantage that no competitor can match. And you can see its power in our strengthening ties across the Indo-Pacific, in today's expanded and united NATO, and in the 50-country Ukraine Defense Contact Group that I convene. Our budget remains rooted in our 2022 National Defense Strategy, Our request positions the United States to tackle the department's pacing challenge, the People's Republic of China, with confidence and urgency. It will help meet the acute threat of Putin's increasingly aggressive Russia. It will help us tackle the persistent dangers that we've just seen from Iran and its proxies in their attack on Israel. It will help us take on the threats from North Korea, global terrorist organizations, and other malign actors. And it will help us continue to deter aggression against the United States and our allies and partners, and to prevail in conflict if necessary. Now, today, I want to underscore three key messages. First, even as our budget request abides by the mandatory caps set by the Fiscal Responsibility Act, it is aligned to our strategy. We made tough but responsible decisions that prioritize near-term readiness, modernization of the joint force, and support for our troops and their families. Our approach dials back some near-term modernization for programs not set to come online until the 2030s. Second, we can only fully reach the goals of our strategy with your help. And I'm grateful that Congress passed the fiscal year 2024 appropriations in March. The single greatest way that Congress can support the department is to pass predictable, sustained, and timely appropriations. My third and final message is that the price of U.S. leadership is real, but it is far lower than the price of U.S. abdication. As the President has said, we're in a global struggle between democracy and autocracy, and our security relies on American strength of purpose. And that's why our budget request seeks to invest in American security and in America's defense industrial base. It's also why the administration has requested nearly $60 billion in the National Security Supplemental for the department. And that supplemental would support our partners in Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan. And it would make key investments to increase submarine production. In fact, about $50 billion of this supplemental would flow through our defense industrial base, creating good American jobs in more than 30 states. Now, we are more than 2 years into the Kremlin's war of aggression against Ukraine, and Putin is betting that the United States will falter, abandon our friends, and leave Ukraine in mortal danger. If the Kremlin prevails in Ukraine, it would embolden would-be aggressors around the globe. And we know that China, Iran, and others are watching what Putin does and how we respond. So we look to our partners in Congress to help us make the investments needed to strengthen America's security through both the supplemental and the President's budget requests. The United States military is the most lethal fighting force on earth, and with your help, we're going to keep it that way. I am truly grateful for your support for our mission and for our troops, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. General Brown, you're recognized.
Chairman Calvert, Ranking Member McCollum, Chairman Cole, and distinguished members of the committee. I'm honored to join Secretary Austin and Honorable Mike McCord to appear before you today. On behalf of the Joint Force, the Department of Defense civilians, and our families, I want to thank Congress for your steadfast support and the opportunity to testify on the fiscal year 2025 defense budget request, which reflects our shared commitment to national security. The global security environment is increasingly complex. The 2022 National Defense Strategy identifies 5 key challenges. The People's Republic of China, our pacing challenge, continues its risky behavior around the globe. A newly aggressive Russia with its unprovoked war against Ukraine. A reckless Iran, who, as we saw just this past weekend, attempts to escalate regional conflict with unprecedented attacks in support of proxy forces. A destabilizing North Korea, which threatens regional security, and violent extremist organizations which leverage instability to advance their cause. These challenges are interconnected, which demands a strategic approach addressing the immediate threats while also preparing for future contingencies. Days after becoming the chairman, I laid out 3 expectations in my message to the Joint Force. Learning our warfighting skills has primacy in all we do. Modernizing and aggressively leading with new concepts and approaches, and trust is the foundation of our profession. Our military exists to fight and win our nation's wars. We train every day to ensure we are so good at what we do that we deter any adversary from engaging the U.S. in conflict. This budget requests $147 billion to sustain readiness and ensure the department can counter near-term threats. We're also focused on better integrating our allies and partners in our planning and operations by investing in critical programs and capability, expanding security cooperation, exercises, training, and interoperability. Our investments in readiness ensure the joint force can respond when the nation calls. While we are focused on our readiness for today, it's critical to modernize and lead with new concepts to prepare for tomorrow. The department continues to invest in capability and capacity to outpace our competitors while transforming from costly legacy platforms that are no longer relevant to the threat. This budget strategically invests in $167.5 billion in procurement, underscoring our commitment to equip the joint force with unparalleled combat capabilities across every domain. This budget also invests $143.2 billion in research, development, tests, and evaluation of future capabilities that will retain our strategic edge. Finally, this budget invests significantly into nuclear modernization, digital innovation, and a strengthened defense industrial base. With rapidly evolving threats and technologies, accelerating our modernization is crucial. Lastly, trust is the foundation of our profession. Joint force must build upon and uphold trust in each other, trust with our families, trust of our elected leaders, and trust of our nation. Enhancing the quality of service and the quality of life of our personnel is not just a moral obligation, it's a strategic imperative. This budget includes investments in quality of service efforts such as advanced training, educational benefits, and career development, while also investing in quality of life projects like housing, medical clinics, and child care facilities, as well as funding spouse employment initiatives, enhanced mental health resources, and robust programs to combat sexual assault. We must create an environment where all can reach their full potential. Trust that our joint force stands ready to defend our national interests, ready to deter aggression, and ready, if necessary, to fight and win our nation's wars. I thank you for your support and collaboration and our shared commitment to face the security challenges of today and prepare for tomorrow. We are living in consequential times, and there is no time to waste. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General. I want to make sure that each member has a chance to ask questions, so each member will have at least 5 minutes to answer their questions. When your time returns yellow, you have 1 minute remaining. First, I'll recognize myself. Innovation and rapid fielding to the warfighter has been a #1 priority of mine since coming to Congress. There are many efforts underway, and I'm encouraged by this momentum. However, as stated before, and I support the Replicator initiative, in no way should Replicator cannibalize from the hedge fund established in FY24. General Brown, the transition of requirements to capabilities to a program of record is low, not well understood, and opaque to warfighters and industry alike. How will you address this issue during your tenure?
Chairman, I appreciate the question, and I would also offer I have the same focus on being able to accelerate capability to our warfighters. You know, part of this dialogue is really the collaboration that I try to do. I know it with the service chiefs, but how we engage with from our requirements through our acquisition and through industry to best accelerate each of these capabilities to go from a prototype to production. This also is very important about the defense industrial base, so we can actually make sure we can be able to deliver the capability once we identify the innovation and be able to move it much more quickly into the hands of our warfighters. And so it's going to require leadership, which I'm happy to do, but it's also going to require for us to have on-time resourcing, a constant demand signal, and to build that trust across the spectrum to make sure we bring the capability forward much faster.
Well, I look forward to working with you on that. I hope we can make sure that we deliver the funds on time. Secretary Austin, last week, Undersecretary Hsu inaugurated the Transition Tracking Action Group, which will employ advanced analytics to track how the department delivers capability to the field. Will you commit that this effort will be collaborative with Congress and that you'll support its success?
Absolutely, Chairman. Again, I commend Ms. Shue, or the Honorable Shue, on the things that she's done since we've been together. I think she's done a number of things to include things like Raider and OSC, as you know, to help us bridge the valley of death. And the programs that you mentioned, or the initiatives that you mentioned, are really mutually supportive. And we're going to continue to do everything we can to move capability as quickly as we can across the valley of death and get it into the hands of our warfighters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Secretary General Brown, Undersecretary McCord, the Senate passed is supplemental, and it includes funding for allies and partners in EUCOM, CENTCOM, and INDOPACOM, as well as much-needed humanitarian assistance. Mr. Secretary, I'm going to ask a couple of questions together. Could you please let this committee know how our allies and partners are reacting to our delays in the enhancement of the supplemental? General Brown, please share with us your military assessment of the situation in Ukraine today and what it looks like for tomorrow. Mr. McCord, we know that the services are utilizing base funds to cover the cost of deployed personnel operating in EUCOM and CENTCOM. If we do not enact a supplemental, how will this impact the services FY24 base activities? So in general, why do we need to pass the supplemental right away? And is the United States losing stature in the world community? Thank you, gentlemen.
We will recess and have the disruption removed. Mr. Secretary, you're recognized.
Well, thank you, Chairman. Delaying the supplemental sends a terrible signal to our allies and partners, and they will question whether or not we are committed to this cause and whether or not we are a reliable partner. And we have, as you know, we have led every inch of the way in terms of making sure that security assistance is provided to Ukraine. We've united NATO, been instrumental in uniting NATO in ways that we haven't seen. Actually, NATO has expanded, and so I think that American leadership in this endeavor has been really, really important. I think that. It's also, the supplemental is also important to us for our security as well. This supplemental invests in our industrial base. As you know, we don't provide funds to Ukraine. The Department of Defense doesn't. We provide materials in terms of weapons, vehicles, munitions, and all of those things are replaced by us, and the replacements are designed and built in our industry, and so that means good jobs, jobs for people in America. So if that supplemental was passed, and when it gets passed, some $50 billion or so would flow through some 30 states here in America, and I think that's really important. And again, the supplemental not only provides support for Ukraine, but it also for Taiwan.
Committee will stand in recess until the Capitol Police can restore order. Please instruct the Capitol Police to remove the disruption.
Lloyd, Austin, you're a liar. You lied to your nation about the genocide in Gaza. You're a liar. You lied to the American people about the genocide in Gaza.
So to sum it up, this supplemental is really important for a number of reasons. And again, it's important to us for our security as well. And it's really important that we have the ability to replenish the stocks in our inventory that will be critical for us going forward.
Ranking Member McCollum, you asked about my military assessment on Ukraine. And I'll just tell you that Ukraine right now is facing some dire battlefield conditions. And it's partly because their capability from a resourcing standpoint, from whether it's munitions, whether it's vehicles, whether it's platforms, they're not being outmatched by the Russians. They've had some Ukrainians have had some positive gains in the course of the 2+ years that they've been in this conflict, regaining more than 50% of the territory that the Russians seized at the beginning of the conflict. Those hard-fought gains can be lost without our support. And so it's important that we continue to provide them the capabilities that they require. And so when I think about this, I think about the supplemental does three things. One, it supports Ukraine's ability to defend itself. It shows, it puts money into our defense industrial base, not just for Ukraine, but for many of our allies and partners, because the U.S. equipment is valued around the world. And last, it shows U.S. leadership. I've been in this job 6 months, and I've had about 150 engagements with my counterparts from around the world. And they often talk about U.S. leadership. I can tell you it's wants, it's desired, and the actions we do are sending a message of where our commitments are, and it also sends a message to our adversaries. And I think it's important that we continue to show leadership like we've done throughout my entire career wearing this uniform, and I want to make sure that we do that.
Ranking Member, thank you. Well, the security assistance is, of course, the most urgent, time-sensitive part of the supplemental and cannot be replaced with anything in the base budget. You highlighted the lesser-known part is that the Secretary and the President, of course, can deploy forces quite legally where they choose to, and we've surged forces in Europe the entire fiscal year to date, Navy in particular, and CENTCOM the same way. We have incurred over $2 billion and counting of operational costs that if we can't get the supplemental, will have to be absorbed in the base budget. We would have to work with this committee and the other committees to try and reprogram funds, hopefully not from direct readiness, but from, if not that, readiness enabling things like facilities maintenance and equipment maintenance. So there is an impact on our forces and our readiness as well if we cannot get the supplemental approved.
Thank you. Mr. Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary and General Brown, I want to ask you if you would. First of all, I want to compliment you. Thank you for the performance of our forces and your leadership in the recent attack by Iran on Israel. I thought our personnel were just outstanding, and that reflects well certainly on both of you and our military. What additional things, in your professional opinion, do we need to do to provide Israel with what it needs to defend itself in the short term?
Well, thanks, Chairman. The most important thing that we can do right now is to pass the supplemental, and that will provide us the opportunity to continue to provide security assistance to Israel in the form of air defense interceptors, munitions, and things that it critically needs to be able to defend itself. But that supplemental, I would say, Chairman, is truly the most important thing that I would highlight for you. So.
General?
Chairman, I'd echo those comments. And as I have a chance to talk to my Israeli counterpart and my other counterparts region, it's important that we provide that capability through the supplemental. But I also think about what it does for us and for our forces. And I'll just also highlight, I couldn't be prouder of the work done by our forces over the course of this past weekend. It shows the professionalism of our force, and that's why we had the most combat credible and the most respected force in the world, because of events like that.
I'd also ask you both, obviously, when we employ our forces in this way, they're exposed themselves to being attacked, and we've certainly had plenty of incidents from Iran attacking. So where are we at in terms of force protection for our men and women on the ground that are engaged in these activities?
Force protection is of utmost importance to me and to the department and to the President. and we have done a lot in the last several months to reinforce our force protective posture in the region. As you know, we deployed a number of additional assets over the last several months to ensure that we accounted for just about any contingency that could arise. And we, as I said earlier, while we know that we haven't seen any additional attacks from Shia militia groups over the last several weeks, we know that that could change in a moment's notice. If it does, then you can expect that we will do what's necessary to protect our troops, and that we will respond at a time and place of our choosing.
Again, I echo exactly what the Secretary said. It's very unfortunate we lost 3 service members back in January, but the tremendous work by our forces for force protection and be able to respond like we did back at the beginning of February sent a pretty clear message that we will defend ourselves, and as the Secretary highlighted, we'll continue to do so.
Obviously, this supplemental has a lot of different components to it. We've talked a lot about Israel and Ukraine, the importance of both those, and I certainly agree and hope we can get that done literally this week. But there's another component portion, of course, and that's directed to the Western Pacific, both to our own forces and to Taiwan. Widely known that Taiwan has ordered billions of dollars worth of weapons from our country that haven't been delivered. Can you give us some insight as to the difficulties why we have not been able to help a country that literally is under enormous pressure from China receive weapons that it's actually paid for?
This has been an area of focus for us, Chairman. We, from the very beginning, I asked my team to bore into what was causing the delays or is causing the delays. And there are a number of things that come together to create those delays. And we are working hard to make sure that in every way possible, we do everything we can to speed the process up. I agree with you that this is critical capability that's very much needed by Taiwan. And so we're going to continue to work on this. But it's a complex picture, but nonetheless, we're going to make sure that we're doing everything we can to move as quickly as possible. And we continue to communicate to our allies and partners where we are in terms of getting them the needed capability. And again, I could not agree with you more. This is really, really important. So.
Okay. One last question, and I'll direct this to you, General Brown. You're very familiar with Tinker Air Force Base. We've talked about it a lot over the years. As you know, the AWACS wing is primarily based out of Tinker. Those are really old airframes, E3s. We know we're beginning to try and address that problem, but this is something I've raised in this committee for many, many years. Tell me where we're at in terms of the E7. I am a little disturbed. I think in the department budget, we're zeroing out that line. Again, I know you're under a lot of pressure or money for that right now, but let me know where we're at, because I do worry with the Russians. This is, airborne early warning combat control capability. We have lost a lot of that as we've retired E3s. We haven't been able to replace them anywhere near as rapidly as we should. So give us an update on how we're doing there.
Well, Chairman, I'm a little bit removed from my time in the Air Force, but I'll defer to the Air Force to get to some specifics, and we'll do that.
I'll have that opportunity next week with
okay.
So.
But one of the things we were really trying to do was, first of all, as you know, you got to buy the green aircraft from and then convert it over. And we were looking at the long lead items to make sure we were able to do that, but also at the same time working with our allies and partners, particularly the Australians, who have the platform today, and we have airmen in Australia that are training. So not only it's the aspect of getting the capability like you described with the prototype, but also marrying up our service members so they can operate it as soon as it becomes available. And we'll continue to work very hard to make sure we bring that capability forward as well.
Well, I look forward to working with you on that, but I just want to highlight as a matter of real concern. I think this really relates to Chairman Calvert's larger point about delivering weapon systems on time and on budget. And I think we've got a problem across the board. We've used a lot of, eaten up a lot of our immediate capability on the assumption certain things would be ready at a certain time, and it hadn't happened. So we have a gap where the capability's gone and we haven't got the replacement online. Worries me a lot. With that, yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Laura.
Chairman. Mr. Secretary, welcome. Sorry, we're kind of hearing hopping this morning, so I welcome you to the committee. Mr. Secretary, it's well known that the Navy is experiencing significant issues related to shipbuilding, and in particular submarines. We know we need more ships, more subs, but we lack the infrastructure and the workforce to stay on track. I want to be clear that the private sector could do more to help. There are delays in several programs, including both the Columbia and Virginia-class submarines and a future aircraft carrier. We also have a significant backlog of ship and submarine maintenance, all of which have a footprint in my state. These delays will impact the Navy's readiness, and the Navy completed a 45-day shipbuilding review to address some of these issues. And I noted in a recent article here, Sea Air Space, that it says that the Secretary of Navy says 45-day shipbuilding review will be followed by another review. Can you share with us your impressions of the findings of the first review, particularly the delays in the Columbia-class submarine, and how this might impact the shipyard industrial base, and what this committee can do to assist you?
Regarding the delays, I share your concern. As you know, we're requesting to invest in one Virginia class this year versus two. Mm-hmm. And the reason that we're doing that is because there's a backlog. And rather than increase that backlog, the right thing to do, in my view, is to invest in the industrial base in terms of giving the industrial base the means to expand capacity by recruiting and retaining the right people, making sure that they can strengthen their supply chains. And so in 23 and 24, we asked you for $1.9 billion to invest in the submarine industrial base. And this year, we're asking you for, in this budget, for some $4 billion, for the industrial base, for the 25 budget. That's in addition to the $3.3 billion that's included in the supplemental. So as you can see, there's some pretty significant investment in the industrial base, and I think we have to do everything we can to put those resources to good use. Now, I met with the CEOs of General Dynamics and Huntington Ingalls here recently, and we talked about what their challenges were in terms of workforce challenges and supply chain challenges, and we talked about how we could best use those resources that you are allowing us to invest in. So certainly they are doing things on their own to invest in increasing capacity, and I think the right things are going to happen. It's just going to take a bit more time. And as you know, because of AUKUS, Australia is also investing in our submarine base. So the amount of money and the amount of resources that we're putting against expanding capacity, I think, is material. It's real capability, and we have to make sure that we're putting it to good use. I know that industry is serious about it, and again, it's just going to take a bit more time.
I understand, and if we could, and we can speak offline, but the findings of the 45-day review, I understand that, and I think the committee has tried to provide resources, but then I just, read that we are then looking at additional review to deal with ordering another review to take a deep dive into the opportunities for improvement. I don't know how many dives we need with regard, and that's with regard to submarines. How many dives are we going to accommodate here? But I would like to know. I hope the committee would like to know the results of that review, where you think it takes us, and what is going on with an additional review of this. And I appreciate your working with General Dynamics and others and getting their view, and the Australians. If I can ask you a question about continuing resolutions, I appreciate your comments and your testimony regarding about the importance of passing government funding bills on time to ensure our nation's safety. Keep the industrial base strong, out-compete our adversaries. Many of my colleagues speak at length about wanting to achieve these goals, yet, as you know, we passed the defense spending bill this year over 5 months late. I repeat, 5 months late. I hope that we do not continue to play games with our federal spending process this year. Can you elaborate on the negative effects of continuing resolutions for the Department of Defense, American manufacturers, the industrial base, and for our readiness generally? What would be the consequences of another CR this year, Mr. Secretary? I hope General Brown and Mr. McCord can chime in as well.
Well, the effects of the CRs are significant, especially if you have CRs that last that long. Mm-hmm. You obviously can't initiate new starts. You lose a lot of time on initiatives, and the one thing that you can't buy back is time. And so over the course of years, these things compound, and they add some of the friction that we've been discussing. But again, I think the best way that we can help ourselves is to make sure that we receive an on-time budget. And as you know, our budget request is directly linked to our strategy. So without a budget, we can't execute the strategy to its fullest. And I've been pretty deliberate in asking my staff to maintain course on making sure that everything that we ask for is directly linked to the strategy. And we've done a good job of that over the last 3 years. But if you don't get a budget on time, you're not executing to your full capability. So it has a significant impact on our ability to do a number of things, but you can't buy back time.
General?
Thanks for the question. I'll tell you, I've been a general officer for about 15 years, and we spent about a third of that in continuing resolutions. And the challenge we have there is, and I'll use this year as an example, there's about 400 things we couldn't do, whether it was new starts, change our levels of our procurement, or MILCON. And so the concern I have there is that what it does to us is it drives uncertainty, it erodes trust, particularly when we work with our defense industrial base, and then it increased cost and increased time. And we talked earlier about when we want to deliver a capability on time, the best way to do that is have a resourcing on time. But I think the same thing for us as a department is that we have a consistent demand signal, which is why multi-year procurement is another piece that helps that demand signal. It allows the defense industrial base to do their supply chains, have a workforce that has consistency in employment. And so it's important that all that comes together for our national security. It's really, it's hugely important.
Thank you. Mr. McCord.
As Secretary noted and General Brown noted, we have now emerged into a pattern over many years of spending about a third of each fiscal year in a CR, which is much more problematic on the acquisition side. To go back to Chairman Cole's comments about trying to deliver things on time, our contracting gets delayed. We have a better time managing on the operating side than we do on the acquisition side. In this year, the particular issues were the difference between our request and the CR was about $25 billion. So think about losing $2 billion a month, falling behind, hoping that you'll catch that up. But also, just given the way that the Fiscal Responsibility Act was written, there was a chance, however remote, of a full year CR and of a sequester. And so myself and others spent considerable time planning for things that didn't happen, which was also time that could have been used on other, more productively.
Mm-hmm. Just as final comment, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's, and the ranking member mentioned it a moment ago, this winds up being a terrible waste of taxpayer dollars. And people who care deeply about that should think about this, as well as people who care about our national security and our being able to do. You can't buy time. I think that's a critical comment, Mr. Secretary. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And I think that we would all agree no one on this committee enjoys continuing resolutions.
I understand that.
And I hope that we could talk to some of our friends and colleagues over in the other side of the building in the United States Senate. We got our bills done relatively on time, and unfortunately the Senate seems to get in the habit of not passing appropriations.
Well, Mr. Secretary,
on both sides of the aisle.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, I think we have to talk to people on our side who proclaim that continuing resolution would be great. Even shutdown of the government would be great. Well,
I don't think
know,
that
and
was,
I know, and others know that ain't the truth.
That's not anybody on this committee.
No, hey, I'm not talking about this. Please, people shouldn't feel threatened, but it's out there.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, welcome to the subcommittee, and General Brown, congratulations on your elevation. First time in front of us. You're with us as chairman of the Joint Chiefs. So congratulations and welcome. Let's talk a moment about the ramifications of what we do in Ukraine. Obviously, our most severe non-combatant is absent from the scene. But the ramifications of what we do there or don't do there is heavy. Mr. Secretary, would you care to tell us what you think is the bigger picture, the strategic and moral importance of the situation in Ukraine as it relates with us?
You know, what we said from the very beginning, sir, is that we want to see, at the end of the day, a Ukraine that is a democratic, independent, and sovereign state that has a means to defend its territory and deter aggression. And Ukraine is not asking for us to fight the fight for them. They are asking for us to assist by providing some of the means that they need to protect themselves and defend their territory. And we've done that over the last 2 years, and that's why they are in the place that they are now. I mean, they've defended against a much superior force, and not only held their ground, but also taken back some 50% of what Russia, the ground that Russia occupied initially. And I think for a much smaller force, I think that's commendable. But unless they have the air defense interceptors, the artillery munitions, and other things that they need, it's going to be very difficult for them to sustain their efforts. Now, if they are not successful, to your question, it has ramifications not only for Europe but for the United States of America, because we all know that Putin won't stop in Ukraine. This will continue, and our allies on the Eastern Front there are very, very concerned about that, and rightfully so. It will also signal to other autocrats around the globe that the United States is not a reliable partner. And so all of the alliances and partnerships that we've worked hard to develop over the years will be in question in terms of their eyes. So it has significant ramifications. But again, I think Ukraine has done an incredible job of inflicting significant damage on the Russian military with a much smaller force. And they've done that with our help and the help of some 50 nations that we've rallied in their support.
Well, with Mr. Putin saying very openly and repeatedly that he wants to restore the old Soviet Union, and all of the nation states in Eastern Europe especially, as you have said, are looking to us, and if we fail them, I think it fuels further the belief that Putin will try to succeed in restoring the old Soviet Union. Do you agree with that? Do you agree with that?
I absolutely agree, sir. And I think Putin believes that he can wait us out. He believes that the resolve of the Western countries will soon fade, and our our coalition will fracture, but Putin's wrong. We're going to continue to try to find ways to support Ukraine.
Let me quickly ask you about landmines in Ukraine. 60 Minutes on CBS last week did a story about the landmines that have been sown all through Ukraine by Putin and his forces. What can you tell us about that problem?
The Russians have made extensive use of landmines, and we saw the Ukrainians go up against that last spring as they launched their offensive. And they've done that. The Russians have done that in every place they fought. But in this case, the territory, the terrain is littered with just with landmines, and it will take years to police this up, to clean this up. We've stood up a capability coalition with countries who are volunteering to pool together their capabilities to assist Ukraine in acquiring the right capabilities to address this problem going forward. But it's going to be something that is going to require a lot of countries to work together on in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. I recognize Mr. Cole for an announcement.
I think probably good news on all fronts. Just want folks to know that the three component bills of the supplemental have been filed. Three. One for Israel, one for Ukraine, one for the Western Pacific. My understanding there'll be a fourth bill that relates to border security, but those will be the component parts of the supplemental will be considered independently. So just want people to be aware of that. I think that's good news all around. Yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen, for that announcement. Mr. Rupersberger.
Yes, thank you. First thing, thank you all for being here today and for your service to our country. This is a very important time. And Honorable McCord, thank you for all you do and your expertise. We're going through the president's budget and the supplemental, and I share your concerns about the current global security environment and the multi-faced challenges that we face. Just last weekend, Iran directly attacked Israel for the first time in decades. What happened in the Middle East this past weekend is a snapshot of what happens every day in Ukraine. But right now, Ukraine is running dangerously low on ammunition and other equipment, as you stated before. Without additional aid, I don't see how much longer they can hold out. And amidst all these conflicts, there is China. The National Defense Strategy identifies the PRC as our pacing threat, and while the global security environment is rapidly changing, we continue to be in a great power competition with China. So in that vein, General Brown, can you please describe how China is helping Russia reconstitute its military since its invasion of Ukraine? How is the PRC strategically exploiting the conflict to gain advantage in its great power competition with us?
Excuse me. Thanks for the question. And so how the PRC is helping Russia is, it's very low level, but by and large, it's by not condemning the acts of Russia invading another country. And how that has impact is how the PRC is watching what Russia is doing. They're watching what we're doing, and they're doing things to prepare themselves should they decide to pursue any type of conflict in the Indo-Pacific. And so it's hardening their capabilities from an economic standpoint, but also looking at their military capabilities and what they can learn as they watch the current events there in Russia, in Ukraine, excuse me.
Well, thank you for that. And it's apparent that it is not helping Ukraine. We are helping China. Now, in March, the Senate passed a national security supplemental that provides foreign aid to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. It sounds like we're set to consider some version of that in the House, hopefully. Now, Secretary Austin, why is it critical to our own national security that we get additional military aid to Ukraine as soon as possible? If we care about the threat of China, why does it follow that we should also care about Ukraine and whether it wins or loses?
Well, thanks, sir. And again, in terms of our own national security, we know that, I believe that Putin won't stop it with Ukraine. I mean, I think he will continue to seek to pull back in some of those countries that were in the former Soviet Union, and I think we can look for significant turbulence in the region going forward if he is successful. We have provided a number of elements to Ukraine, and we'll hope to continue to do that in terms of security assistance. We have to replenish what we've provided, and so having the means to do that, I think, is really, really important for our readiness and our security. And you mentioned China. China, Iran, and others are watching what happens in Ukraine. And if the United States proves to be an unreliable partner, and not only will it erode the confidence of our European allies in NATO, but it'll also encourage players like the PRC and Iran to do the kinds of things that they would want to do anyway. So I think this creates more discord potentially in the future. But this is really important. Ukraine matters not just to Europe; it matters to the whole world. This is about the rules-based international order and making sure that a country, a leader of a country, can't wake up one day and decide that he's going to erase the borders of his neighbor and get away with it. I mean, there has to be some kind of international order. So.
Yeah, I want to make this comment. I'm very concerned that certain members of this House are acting as if Russia is our ally. And I hope that we can get the facts out that this is a very serious issue. And I wish more people who feel that way in this House would attend this type of hearing to realize how dangerous that is.
Thank the gentleman for his question. Mr. Womack.
Thank you. My thanks to the gentlemen before us for their longstanding service to this country. I want to follow up on a conversation that we were having with the ranking member of the full committee, Ms. DeLauro, on budget process and on continuing resolutions and this sort of thing. Secretary Austin, have you ever known Russia to operate under a continuing resolution?
I have not, sir, and I've never known China to operate under a continuing resolution either.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because my next question was to General Brown. Have you ever known China to operate under a continuing resolution?
I have not.
So if they have needs, they take care of those needs? Secretary McCord, Kim Jong-un, does he operate ever under a continuing resolution?
He does not, Mr. Moa.
And I won't bore you with the others. I had listed ISIS-K, violent extremist organizations. The fact is, adversaries to our way of life and to the way of life of free nations all around the globe, they don't operate under continuing resolutions. And they don't threaten to shut their government down. And to me, it places a heavy risk on our men and women who serve in the greatest military on the planet that we would ever consider delaying a budget like we did this past year for 5.5 months in the fiscal year, because I think that does endanger our way of life. I'll leave it there. Secretary Austin, the DOD budget request for 25 is capped at a 1% increase compared to 24 under the FRA. It's clear the DOD prioritized increased funding for some services more than others. For example, the Army saw a 0.2% increase in funding. The Air Force got 1.1%. Can you outline the risks that we buy in this budget proposal to the Army if we adopt those top-line constraints?
Because of the top line, we had to make some choices, but we linked our request to our strategy, and these were difficult, but I think prudent choices. And again, as we have worked with the services, I think that you know, the investments that we've made in near-term readiness and in modernization and in taking care of our people will pay significant dividends for us in the near to midterm and in the long term as well. And we also recognize that in the out years, the top line is going to have to grow a bit in order to make sure that we maintain pace and speed with modernization. So it is something that we don't take lightly in terms of, you know, how we resource the entire force, and choices have to be made. The services participate in our deliberations, and so again, I think it's the risks are acceptable at this point in time. So.
General Brown, and both of you are keenly aware that joint multinational large-scale training scale exercises enhance our forces' readiness. Can you describe how these exercises help our formations in learning how to integrate at scale and across domains, and how the continued repetition set the joint force up for success in the face of conflict?
You know, every time we get to train, whether it's by individually within our services, train as a joint team, or train with our allies and partners, it just makes us stronger. And what that does, it allows us to work on our areas of interoperability, but it also identifies some areas we can improve upon. Because we want to continue, every time we have an exercise, is to step away from that exercise and learn something about ourselves as a force that will be applicable to the threat. And so every time we do this, we try to take the lessons learned, and they're not just lessons learned or observed. It's how we implement those to ensure that our joint force with our allies and partners can do what the nation asks for, but also for our national security and the security of our allies and partners as well.
So if we were forced to make some decisions, buy some more risk because of budget constraints that we have, where would those joint exercises fall in the list, if you will, of candidates for either scaling back or doing without?
Well, in this particular budget, we focused on readiness, and so as the Secretary highlighted, we deferred some of the modernization to maintain that readiness. And so, one of the responsibilities I have as the chairman, working with the Joint Chiefs, is to balance that risk between our readiness and our modernization, and we take a hard look at all the various exercises. I would also highlight the fact that now, because of technology, we can do a fair amount through simulation and the like, but we're trying to use every tool we can to ensure our readiness and take advantage of the exercise opportunities that we do have.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, and to all of our witnesses, Secretary General and Mr. McCord, thank you so much for what you all do. I would like to bring your attention to the Secretary and General Brown. Want to get your thoughts, what the department looks at sharing information and resources across combatant commands. And in particular, I'm talking about NORTHCOM and SOUTHCOM when it deals with the southern border, what's happening in Mexico. You know very well what's happening there. And I'm talking about drugs and criminal organizations, the amount of money they make, not only in passing drugs, but if you look at, 7, 8 million encounters at the border the last 3 years, multiply that by an average of 8,000 that the Coyote charged, they're making billions of dollars to our southern border. And we have NORTHCOM that has Mexico, and then SOUTHCOM has everything south, Central America and south. And I want to see how we can get NORTHCOM and SOUTHCOM to work better in sharing information and resources, because, as you know, part of the work that y'all do is the national security and defense of our country also in that particular area. So just want to get your thoughts. And we have already talked to both commanders for SOUTHCOM and NORTHCOM, and we've asked them if they can align themselves because they're apart. They see Mexico very differently. Just want to get your thoughts on what we can do to get those two commanded areas to work better.
Well, thanks, sir, and thanks for your interest in this topic. I do believe that that we do a credible job of working together currently. Both commanders are great commanders, and I have tremendous confidence in both of them. Having said that, there are always things that we can do to improve our collaboration, and I think this gets to your point. From my perspective, what I see the commanders doing is just that, finding ways to support each other, finding ways to make sure that there are no gaps that can be exploited. But you know, the environment's dynamic, and there will always be a new challenge that presents itself that will require us to develop additional capabilities and also work with allies and partners to develop their capabilities so that they can you know, control and protect their sovereign space. So to answer your question, I do believe that there are always things that we can do better, and we will continue to focus on that. So.
Thank you. Yeah, and
if I could, I would add is it's not only as Secretary Howley, we've got tremendous commanders, but it's also the work that happens between the staffs, between the joint staff, between the staff at Southcom and Northcom to work in the next level of detail and how things are interconnected and to flatten that communication and using some of the digital tools we have to be able to share information to visualize. And then also the last thing I'd highlight is just the relationships with the interagency, but also relationships with our partners within both combatant commands to get their perspective as well helps us to raise our awareness and have those two commands work better together.
Yes, sir. Because we need to see everything south of our border together instead of two. And they both commanders are fantastic. We just want to see if we can push a little bit more on that. I would ask you also, the unity of government is so important. China is just, you know, what they're doing in Latin America. They're in almost every country. And last night, somebody sent me a video, and I remember we had gone to El Salvador, and the new president at that time wanted to work with us and said, we want to keep China away. And whatever happened, our relationship with El Salvador, you know, the video that they were showing was this brand new library, and they were showing off this new library as, you know, China gets involved. And right next to him was the Chinese ambassador. And some years ago, when we went to go see him at a Codale, he was trying to keep China. I guess he felt that the U.S. was not providing the support. And guess who's right there with them? And that, I can name country after country. You know what they're doing down there. So, you know, just showing up, and I know you all are